Hey guys, this is Illusion PODFIC, and today we're going to be reading another chapter of Green Through and Through by another fucking Robin. This is chapter 10. The computers in this universe fucking suck. Like, come on, Google. Which is like, can this universe even try? Take eons to start up. And when it does, it opens 100 windows because Peter was frustratingly clicking the icon over 15 minutes ago. It's ridiculous. But then again, this universe doesn't have a Tony Stark to create an arc reactor tech, so maybe he should cut them some slack. Nah, screw slack. Peter's allowed to be as bitchy as he wants to be about this stupid tech in this stupid universe. Somehow, he manages to get onto Wikipedia. Why is Google's name different, but Wikipedia's is the same? It makes no fucking sense. He hates the multiverse. First of all, he decides he has to get information about where he is. He's pretty sure there isn't a Gotham back in his world, especially since the city is huge and the accent is East Coast. It's probably New Jersey. Blah. He's in Jersey. Excuse him while he gags. He can hear snickering in his ears, but he ignores it. He is having a very reasonable reaction for someone who just figured out that he's stranded in Jersey. He'd rather be stranded in Savage Island or in Staten Island or something. You're getting off topic. Okay, no need to be so impatient, jeez. Gotham City, 6,800,000,000 results. Okay, so Gotham is a shithole. Peter had an idea of this already, but reading the articles and statistics is different. Hundreds of people die here every year because of their insane living conditions, crime rate, and batshit supervillains, and that means a lot coming from him. Peter regularly fistfights mad or evil scientists, but Gotham is on another level. Unlike New York, Gotham's villains seemed less interested in petty crime and personal schemes, and more focused on who could cause the biggest problems with the highest death toll. Goblin and Ock are insane, but they're no Scarecrow, no Joker. These assholes regularly release biological and chemical weapons on civilians. He's pretty sure that constitutes several war crimes. So Peter is having a hard time seeing why they kept getting sent to Arkham Asylum. Gotham even has its own mental hospital for crying out loud. These guys should be given the electric chair, seeing as this New Jersey uses the death penalty. Peter would be lying if he said that the ease and guiltiness with which he thought about someone dying didn't terrify him. It just makes him angry. Anger that is righteous and justified and almost entirely his own. The villains here are regularly apprehended and jailed by the Bat Clan, but within a month or two, they're out on the streets again, out to kill and maim and terrify again. It's clear that the system is broken down to its core, and it makes him angry, because that isn't something that Peter Parker or Spider-Man can fix. The prison and legal system need some serious reform. Less corrupt police and judges, heavier taxes to the Gotham elite, more funding to infrastructure like shelters, hospitals, and schools, help for addicts and ex-cons, and that's just what Peter can think of off the top of his head. Or, a better lock on the prison doors. But that's basically impossible because the rest of America has basically given up on Gotham and its people, deeming it a lost cause, leaving it almost entirely without funding for the most basic of needs. Like, a functioning prison system? They've practically handed the legal system to the local vigilantes, who spend all their time on the big bad villains. Don't get him wrong, what they do is incredibly important. But the continuous breakouts leave the people of Gotham to fend for themselves, and it isn't like they don't have their own long list of issues, like the insanely high gang, drug, and violent crime rate. Peter decides that Spider-Man will be helping out around here as soon as humanly or spiderly possible. The research into the city leads him down a vigilante rabbit hole. And frankly, there are a ridiculous amount of vigilantes here. Once again, this is coming from a New Yorker. They have the Defenders, of which Peter was an honorary member, thank you very much. The Fantastic Four, the Avengers, Team Red, and like a good dozen other solo heroes. But that's different. Even on the teams, everyone mostly does their own thing. No clear hierarchy. Okay, so Dr. Richards was definitely the leader of the four, but that title is up for grabs between Cap and Tony, and the Defenders and Team Red are just like friends, but sometimes tag along with each other on missions and stakeouts and stuff. The Bat Clan seems to actively work with each other, coordinating patrols, and seemingly in constant contact over comms. They also manage to have a semi-consistent theme, birds and bats, and miscellaneous. Under the Bat category we have Batman, the original emo furry of Gotham, basically Moon Knight in a different font. Batwoman, Miss Jones if she ever decided to wear a costume, Batwing, Batman but make it Iron Man, Black Bat, Miss Romanoff but silent and slightly less deadly. The bird category includes heroes such as Nightwing, he's an acro-bat, but only part-time, Red Robin, yum, Robin, tiny, angry, stabby, Bluebird, Nightwing but punk. And finally, under the mist, Red Hood. Is it a crime lord? Is it a bat? No, it's Red Hood. Spoiler, Kate Bishop but with Arvo and Signal. Only diurnal bat. Lonely boy. Do you see what he means when he says the number of vigilantes in the city is a bit excessive? And they're secretive as hell. There are basically no unblurred photos of them anywhere on the internet that don't come from press conferences. From what is available to him, available being a flexible term, are government files available to the public? No. But are they easily hacked into by Peter? Yes. Peter only recognizes two of them, Nightwing and Red Hood. He can kind of remember watching Nightwing swing through the Gotham skyline, and Red Hood lying on the streets, which is super random, but whatever. The search leads him down another deeper rabbit hole, researching heroes in this universe in general. The Avengers seem to have been replaced with the Justice League, which is a bit on the nose, with members such as Superman, Captain America, and Wonder Woman, Thor, Doom Patrol is the X-Men, and the Terrifics are the Fantastic Four. Most of these supers come from cities or countries that he has never heard of before, like Themyscira or Metropolis. Seriously, what is up with these names? That is the most redundant name ever. It's just a synonym for city. That's one of the biggest differences between this universe and his own. The geography. There are so many new US cities, like Star City or Fawcett City. Okay, someone needs to be fired on the board for naming cities, because what the fuck are those? But also, this universe doesn't have Sokovia, Wakanda, Latvia. Instead, they have Byalia, Markovia, and Krot. They do have an Atlantis there, but the king is some guy called Aquaman instead of Namor. Come on, even the people from this universe have to admit that Aquaman sounds like a half-baked villain name, like Hydra Man's cousin. The biggest difference by far is that they don't seem to have mutants or inhumans, but metahumans instead. They're kind of like mutants in that the meta gene and the X gene factor are similar, and kind of like the inhumans in that their genetics need a kickstart in order to give them powers. But the meta gene takes it in the form of physical or mental trauma, whereas inhumans needs exposure to the Terrigen crystal. Peter himself isn't an inhuman or a mutant, but a mutate, like Captain Rogers or Dr. Banner. His powers aren't innate, but given to him through science. But in this world, that doesn't seem to be a common thing, and it's nauseating. Differences are so similar, and the similarities are so different, that it makes his head spin and reel with all the information. It's like the entire world has been tilted ever so slightly on its axis. His hands clench into fists, blood pooling in his palms. Why is everything so different? How can he even exist here when everything is so fundamentally wrong? It feels like this universe is taunting him, dangling familiarity in front of his face only to snatch it away. Peter, let go of the table. What? He isn't holding a table. He tries to look around to find the owner of the lying voice, but the only thing around him is green, green, green. Where had it come from? He's sure it wasn't here before. Frustration condenses in his gut, and he feels polished wood splinter and crack under his fingers. Wait, when did he grab the table? Peter. He let it go, hands trembling in fury. Here you go. Now breathe. He closes his eyes and tries to breathe deeply, like Danny had taught him, attempting to redirect the seething rage in his lungs towards healing the gashes in his hands, trying to focus on the feeling of skin knitting together. He feels the anger start to dissipate. Soon he takes full breaths without the urge to scream or hiss or snarl. He keeps his eyes closed tightly because the world is too bright, even through his eyelids. If he opened them, he would lose his grip on himself. So he sits, just breathing for a long time, focusing entirely on himself. The fresh skin on his hands, the rise and fall of his chest, the slight itch in his gums. Inhale, exhale, until he can pry his eyes open without fear of the light. Inhale, exhale, until the world trickles back. The library is loud. A tangle of paper and whispers and writing, all rustling and humming and scratching together loud, but not like the rush of blood in his ears or the ringing after an explosion. Loud like a voice or a song or a heartbeat. It lets his thoughts rest and settle in his mind. It's nice. Inhale, exhale. He wipes the dried blood on his pants and shakes his head to try and clear the lingering haze of green. He needs to focus on what is important. The people of Gotham. They are important. They need Spider-Man. And Peter can't be Spider-Man without his suit and his webs. He closes the frankly crazy number of tabs he's managed to open and stares at the blank computer background. To make his webs and his suit, he needs money. And he needs chemicals. Two things that he can't get right now. He could get money from a job and chemicals from a school, or maybe an internship, but for those he needs identification. Time to put all those late nights with Ned hacking into the government system to good use. Your hobbies scare me, kid. Oh, Mr. Barnes, you don't even know the half of it. If you thought the hardware was clunky and old-fashioned, then the software is the equivalent of a caveman with stones and clubs. Ned could write better code in his sleep. Hell, Peter could write better code if you gave him a few hours. The security gets slightly better the deeper in the government records he goes, but the improvement is so minor they shouldn't have bothered. After an hour or two, Peter Benjamin Parker is a totally legal citizen of the United States, fully equipped with a birth certificate and most of his other necessary records. He thought the lack of physical copies would be a major issue, but apparently it's quite common for the legal documents of Gothamites to be burned, frozen, or soaked with clay, so it's pretty simple and non-incriminating to request a copy of the digital versions to be sent to the P.O. box of the old bookshop he's been squatting in. The only thing left to do is give himself a legal guardian. It's way too suspicious to be an underage minor with no guardian, and the absolute last thing Peter needs is CPS on his back. Even if it means creating a paper trail for a whole other person, it'll be worth it to stay out of the foster system. He could use Aunt May, but can't associate her with this much crime and good conscience. He could use Tony, but he doesn't see him as a father figure, so it'd be really weird to talk about him like that. Tony is his science mentor. They hang out at the compound and work on engineering problems every other weekend. But Tony isn't a father. He briefly saw him that way when he was 13, but then Tony ghosted him for a year, took away his suit, and left him trapped under a building. After that, Peter realized that Tony didn't trust him, and Tony realized that he had no right to tell Peter what to do. Tony took a step back, a gesture that means, "You're better off without me," but was interpreted as, "I'm better off without you." He later learned through Clint, and way down the line Captain Rogers, that his understanding was wrong. But that didn't make it sting less. But Tony was trying to be better, so they hang out at the compound and work on their gadgets. Better than it used to be, but far from perfect. Peter ran solo for a long time after that first fight with the Vulture. He can admit now that he was afraid of the rejection that came with the idea of a mentor. That's when he met Matt. Although back then he knew him as Daredevil. It was quick and quiet. One day he would swing too close to Hell's Kitchen and swung away with an extra shadow. At first, Peter hated Daredevil. Hated that another hero he looked up to had thought he was incapable. But the longer Daredevil tagged along on his patrols, the more Peter saw that he wasn't hovering. He was helping. One day, they were sitting on a roof, resting after a full night of punching thugs. Daredevil had turned to him and said out of the blue, "My name is Matthew Murdoch. Forward, the ultimate show of trust." Matt had smiled and turned away, looking back out of the city. He didn't want or expect a response. And Peter smiled to himself, and once he had recovered from shock, he said, "Nice to meet you, Matt. My name is Peter Parker." Eventually, they shared their homes and their friends and training. Matt invited Peter around to meet Foggy. Peter introduced Matt to musical theater. Matt had ranted about it being a pain to find a movie with audio descriptions. And unfortunately, neither Peter nor Foggy were any good at commentary, as they both got sidetracked too easily. So Peter tricked him into watching Hamilton together. Matt said he hated it, but his heartbeat betrayed his lies. That was how he met Luke and Danny and Miss Jones, even though Matt was adamant that they were teammates, not a mentor and mentee. Equals. He still taught Peter martial arts, because he was worried, and he still helped Peter with his Spanish homework after school. The memories play behind his eyes and fill his ears with the warm echoes of Matt's laughter, a sound that he may never hear again. The cold crush of heartbreak and grief constricts him, but he decides, in that moment at least, to lean into the crush and treat it like a hug. If the memories and grief is all he has left of his old life, then he'll greet it with open arms and cherish it as a gift. He puts Matt down as his legal guardian. After a slow, agonizing 5 hours, Peter Parker is a totally legitimate 16-year-old boy from New York. His parents died in a plane crash when he was 4 and placed in custody of his paternal aunt and uncle. His Uncle Ben was shot and killed in an armed robbery when he was 12. His Aunt May passed away softly in her sleep 2 months ago, and he was placed under the care of his godfather, Matthew Michael Murdoch, a small-time lawyer in Crime Alley. Pretty good forgery if you asked him. The only problem now is money, because for the first time in his life, he is well and truly broke. Sure, the Parkers weren't the richest, but Peter could always rely on dinner when he got home from school. Even after the battle in New York, there was enough goodwill from May and Ben helping out in the neighborhood to carry them through it relatively unscathed. Relatively. Even after Ben's death, when they were briefly homeless, it was only for 2 weeks. The medical bills and the funeral expenses were too much, and they wound up on the streets. It had been rough, but Harry and Mr. Osborne had found out pretty quickly, and insisted they stay in their penthouse while they got back on their feet, which was way over the top. was something Peter would be eternally grateful for, especially recently. Peter had found himself with a very large supply of friends who would help him out in a heartbeat. Matt, the Storms, Kitty, the Defenders, Wade, the Leads. Here, he didn't have someone to fall back on, so he has to do something he isn't proud of, like stealing $1,000 from Bruce Wayne. From his research into Gotham, he now knows a surprising amount about the local billionaire. He's a ditz, but a seemingly good person. Despite being an airhead, he has managed to get his billionaire friends to donate absurd amounts of money at various parties and galas. As a result, his donations are almost single-handedly keeping the city's infrastructure afloat, sponsoring homeless shelters, charities, schools, and public transportation. He's like the ultimate himbo of Gotham. But Peter needs money, and Wade was very specific in telling him that if he ever had to steal, he should steal from someone who wouldn't notice, like Danny, or someone who wouldn't care, still Danny. And Brucey definitely won't notice. The man very publicly proclaimed that he doesn't believe in the moon, and even if he somehow grew enough brain cells to notice, he probably wouldn't care. He's already sponsoring several orphanages, so what is one more orphan? Plus, MJ has drilled into him that billionaires simply can't not be evil. So for MJ, he wires the money into his, or Matt's, account. Alright guys, and that is the end of chapter 10 of Green Through and Through by Another Fucking Robin. I hope you guys like this chapter, and I'll see you next one.